Good morning to Ashley. I am so excited to have her on the SCAR initiative today. Ashley has a really fascinating story, and I met her a few years ago, and we just really connected as veterans and having somewhat of I don't even know how to explain it. It was almost seemed like it was just kind of instantaneous, or maybe it was on my part. I just felt like we had a really good connection with each other and have stayed in touch since. So I want to give Ashley an opportunity to talk about her military service and introduce herself. So I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I always enjoy sharing my story. I've always told folks that I think there's a lot of power in that. And when we can share our stories, we never know how it will impact another. Sometimes it's a chapter, sometimes it's a sentence, and sometimes it's becomes a page in someone else's survival guide. So a little bit about me. Let's see. Where do I start? I feel like for any podcast that I've done, I feel like I always have this really great lineup of all this stuff, and people are like, "Wow, she's really intense." So I guess I'll give it a crack at it. So I, I'm a veteran of 8 years, Army National Guard, military police. I'm a federal employee. I work for the VA. I'm a public affairs officer. I'm a business owner and entrepreneur. I own and operate Guide on Education Consulting, which is a marketing and communications, almost private sector way for me to continue to solve communication marketing needs in the military connect community. And finally, I am a co-host for the American Legion podcast, Tango Alpha Lima. So I do keep myself fairly busy, but I always like to remind people that it's not necessarily busy, it's productive. And when you can combine productivity with your passion and purpose, you never really work a day in your life. So I've done a abundance of things, from running programs in higher education to facilitating things in correctional facilities to, I mean, gosh, running half marathons by accident to like, being a glutton for pain and getting my second master's now. I really enjoy pursuing opportunities. I've always felt that when we have, what's the turn of phrase? I'll do a hard pass. It's a little early for me. So my brain's a little like, I usually get an upswing and then I'm better at like midnight, I promise. So that's a little bit, that's me without getting too much into the weeds. But I've had a very productive several years in the military community and space, particularly both in higher education and veteran benefits. And now I have the privilege of working with the Veterans Health Administration. So working with folks to tell people's stories is really my passion. So, of course, Lindsay, when you ask me, would I mind sharing my story? Of course, I would love to. It's my thing. So that's a little bit about me. So I'll let you kind of poke and prod where you'd like.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's always amazing to hear another perspective, and I can't wait for people to hear your story. It is very oh gosh, I don't even know the right words for it. It's heartfelt, it's inspiring, it's courageous, it is difficult. There's a lot of words to describe your story. So I want to give you an opportunity to tell us a bit about it. So can you tell us about the story you've chosen to highlight, how this occurred, and the significance of this particular scar?
Sure. So as a mental health advocate, I've always believed that, we have to reduce the stigma of, it's one thing if you go to a doctor, right? You have a broken arm. They're like, oh, you have a broken arm. We're just going to cast it. We'll fix you up. I think from a mental health standpoint, as a country and just globally, I think anxiety, depression, and anxiety, depression, and trauma, whether it's systemic of childhood trauma, sexual trauma, an accident of some sort, a natural disaster, right? When we look at PTS or PTSD, a lot of folks announced just kind of picture veterans, and for some obvious reasons, right? If you're a combat vet, there's this assumption that you've seen some action, you've seen some things that
Right.
normal folks wouldn't be able to relate to, which is makes it a bit more particular.
Mhm.
But many people can suffer from post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic stress disorder with a full diagnosis.
Right.
And anxiety, depression, not taking care of yourself, not having good boundaries,
Mhm.
all of these things, when layered on one another like a beautiful wedding cake, can sometimes topple down if you cut it in the wrong spot.
Right.
So my story is more of a collection of, I would say, compartmentalization over the years, and not fully coping and
Yeah.
processing both my emotions
Mhm.
and how trauma affected me. Now, for anyone out there who's listening, I am going to discuss military sexual trauma. So trigger alert if that's something that is, personal to you, or that you need to take a deep breath or a tactical pause, do so. I will give you all of the bullet points, if you will, of what's happened and what's transpired over almost about an 8-year, almost 9-year since the incident, and how that looks different for a lot of people who may have military sexual trauma. So my story begins in college. I am a freshman at the University of Akron, and I'm trying to figure out my way. I, enroll in an ROTC program, and then the process of raising my right hand to join the military. Leading up to that point, higher education didn't look like a really feasible option for me. It was more of a financial, and how could I get someone to pay for college without having to, I don't know, I guess have the high score at a test. Like, it was not any sort of an overperformer in high school,
Mhm.
nor was I an underperformer. I was pretty mediocre. I was a mediocre kid. I got like a 3.1. I played sports. I had friends, but I wasn't a great test taker. And, when you have to take SATs and ACTs, and they say, oh, these things depend on your livelihood and future. And I'm like, now I look back at that and I'm like, for anyone listening, those things are total bullshit. So don't ever allow a test score to undermine you or determine your self-worth,
Mhm.
because I've always believed that dispositions are not your destiny. Like, just because stuff happens doesn't mean you can't overcome it. So a big thing I've always told people is, I can, I will, watch me, is my response both to trauma and a uh, post growth opportunity, if you will, or post traumatic growth opportunity. So I digress. I am considering my options
Mhm.
for the military. I'm considering what schools I can get into. I'm uncertain at this point what my outcomes are going to be. My parents were hit hard by the recession. I had to take care of, family matters, right? So, I've been working since I was 15. So I don't know what it's like to not have 3 jobs at one time. People are like, what are you doing? And I'm just like, 1, 2, 3, 4. I count them all up. So I'm in this position where I need to find something that works.
Mhm.
And the National Guard worked for me. So I joined the National Guard in November of 2011. And shortly thereafter, for anyone who's not familiar with the National Guard, you go into a recruit sustainment program until you strip off to your basic training and your advanced individual training.
Mhm.
And because I was enrolled in an ROTC program, my MOS, or my job, my occupation, was just kind of like a at random slotted thing where um, we just kind of like went to wherever. I don't even remember how it works. They just kind of slot you in something. It's
Sure.
not super permanent because they're anticipating you're going to commission
Mhm.
and you'll get your whatever job. You have to have something that qualifies you. So they send people for, like, I think it was like cook or something. I don't know, something different. There's nothing wrong with that because I love my cooks. They ended up becoming my best friends.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So I'm I'm getting my way through my first semester. I've joined, I'm waiting to go to training, I'm showing up, I'm doing all the things. I'm doing incredibly well. I'm outperforming my peers. And I'm trying to figure out who I am, discover myself. And unfortunately, sometimes people take advantage of that.
Mhm.
So I found myself at a party, just kind of hanging out with some of my friends who are also the National Guard, who are also in the program. And I ended up, being raped by my peers. And that's right, plural. So it was really difficult because it was like the first time I had ever really had been to, some sort of like party. It really was, there wasn't even a lot of people. There was a very intimate gathering. It wasn't like a typical, some people would say like college rager, right? It was not that. So this was an intimate group of people who I knew, who I've been working out with, who I've been in class with,
Mhm.
who had an established relationship with me, which is unfortunately very common for sexual assault victims, is that who you're, who raped you, unfortunately, who took advantage. So I proceeded to be in like total shock about everything. I was raped by two of my peers who I would go on to serve with.
Mhm.
So this all happens. I'm in shock. I don't know what to think of it. I tried to kind of mask it as like I just had a threesome, or I just had this. Like you make like all these like weird kind of nuances to like tell yourself what happened, and
Mhm.
like make it not sound um as worse as terrible it was,
Sure.
right? So I remember I woke up, I was completely dazed and confused. I was a mess. I was an absolute mess. And I was like, this doesn't feel right. Like, um, they were just like super casual. Then they got like really weird about everything. Like, you
Mhm.
can't say anything. And then I was like, what the hell's going on here? And then I had to like get up and then go show up to formation on campus. And I was like, this is odd. And the next thing I know, I had already heard like murmurs and whispers about what was going on. We're like 18, 19 years old. And these two guys who thought they were like the kings of the world had just committed an assault, but were bragging about it.
Uh,
And nobody said anything. Nobody tried to intervene. There was none of that. So I remember running the lap of like the indoor track. And I just remember this very poignant, I just remember this, it was a very symbolic moment because I was running and I was like running away and I was outrunning my peers.
mm,
But every time I look back, like all I could do is hear them like snickering at me. And that would be like a constant theme throughout my entire military career. I would always be leading from the front, but I'd always have to like watch my back. I
mm,
could never fully trust the people that I was with. So that, of course, laid the foundation for a lot of moral injury for folks that are out there who have encountered moral injury. It's just,
mm,
it can be very disheartening when you are, raped or have some sort of trauma, or you've just had instances where you have not been able to trust people.
mhm,
And unfortunately, people aren't always great in life. So as you can imagine, that stuff tends to open up over the years, where you
mhm,
tend to, you know, close down onto oneself. So this symbolic lap that I took ended up cascading and pushing this momentum into not just the two men who raped me, but also three other men who were their friends who decided that we don't like Ashley. We're intimidated by Ashley. And, I've always found that, very powerful women or professional or leadership driven, ambitious women tend to be bullied as a coping mechanism by mediocre men.
yeah, I agree.
And it's unfortunate that that stuff has to happen. And what it can do on the psyche long term is not great,
Mm,
because it creates this internal sense of like, well, where's my validation coming from? Because I can't get it externally and my self-talk is terrible. And I'm in a position where I'm tired and I'm just exhausted all the time.
mhm,
What does that look like for me?
yeah.
So speed up. I get back from winter break. I'm still processing. I'm pulled into the cadre's office, and I am told that several people came forward and said that I am a disruption, that I have been sleeping around with some of the cadets, that I had integrity violations, that I was not, not the cut from the same cloth of what an officer should be, that I've been accused of sexual assault by a peer that was not true. I was told that I just like apparently had a laundry list of shit I didn't know that I had done. And I was like,
Wow.
this is why am I, this is the first time I'm hearing this. They didn't give me an opportunity to defend. They didn't want to hear my side of the story. They
Right.
just told me that I had fucked up and that there are consequences for my actions and that we don't need any more sluts in the military. And I was like, excuse me? I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, who are you referring to? Why are you talking to me this way? And they were like, listen, like, and these are like some crusty old, like, you know, active duty retired, like cadre, this is like their last step before they get out. They don't give a shit.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to diss all kind of ROTC cadre stuff. Like some of them are really great, but this individual in particular was a piece of shit. So, it's been a decade. I don't care. He's a piece of shit. God.
Call it like you see it. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm just like, yeah, they didn't know what to do with you. And I think when you learn in your military career, like when they don't know what to do with you, you're like a low performer and you're a piece of shit officer. Like sometimes they'll just throw you in random ass details on your way out because they don't want you in charge of people. And this person should not have been in charge of anybody ever. Wow. It's terrifying when someone like that, like, becomes a major or lieutenant colonel and shit. And you're like, really?
Wow.
So you just played the waiting game. Right. So everyone good got frustrated and got out, but you rode the gravy train. But I digress. I don't mean to be spiteful, but it's just something I learned more throughout my career. As I was like, wow, there are a lot of recurring patterns in the military, especially from a leadership standpoint and a toxic leadership standpoint of that.
Yeah.
So I'm in this office. I am bawling my eyes out. I'm like, I try to ask questions. They don't want to tell me. I was like, who are making these accusations? Like, I'm trying to defend myself. And then like, finally, I'm like pressured into saying like, I've got raped by my peers. And I was just like, still in shock. And I was like, listen, like, because you're embarrassed. You're just like embarrassed that you were even in that kind of situation.
Sure.
And then like now you're being forced to basically say out loud what you don't want to admit to yourself, and that it's super fresh and I haven't really processed it, but here they are trying to tell me that you're the victim, like you're like you're not the victim, you're the perpetrator, you started all this shit and now you're going to ruin 5 young men's lives. And I was like, what? I was like, this is bullshit. So I was like, well, I'm going to go to the dean, I'm going to go to whoever, like, this is ridiculous. And they were like, well, we're going to kick you out of the program. And sure enough, like this goes on, like kind of like, it's like trial by combat. So every time like I'm trying to like go and do stuff. So I went from like number 1 in the OML which is the order of merit list, to not being supported by like any of my peers. I wasn't getting any of the leadership development. And then finally, after like coming into my case, they like went and re-interviewed these guys. I'm like, you didn't think to freaking interview all of them since they all had a really close story?
Oh my God.
So they apparently ended up releasing all 5 of the guys and me. They released everyone from the program. They just said, y'all are trash. Get out of here.
Oh my God.
So the 2 men that raped me, actually, I take the hold on. All 5 of them were in my recruit sustainment program. So I still had to go to drill with them until I left for training. And in that time, when we got kicked out of the program, we lost our MOS qualification. So I had to go pick a new job. And I always tell people, like, they're like, oh, wow, you're a military police. That's so badass. I'm like, yeah, it's okay, but it's not what I wanted to do. It was picked for me. Like, I didn't have a choice. Like, I'd already signed a contract. I had to go to training or I was going to be like, it wasn't going to work. So it was like asphalt layer, engineer, MP. And I was like, well, the only one I can really do is MP. So I guess that's where I have to go. And, I had a good time. I was a good military police soldier and NCO, not commissioned officer, but wasn't what I wanted to do. Like, I wanted to lead. I wanted to get into public affairs. I wanted to do like something medical, public health. I wanted to do all kinds of stuff, but that is not what I wanted to do. So you have like this, you go in now with this like animosity, like, great, I have to go do something I don't want to do because some assholes decided to get together and write everything down on a piece of paper and ruin my direct commission spot to do whatever I wanted, active duty, anywhere in the country. So that was a lot to soak in a very short amount of time, like maybe a month or two. And it was really heartbreaking because I still had to be at the same school. I was in the middle of semester. I couldn't leave. So like everything was just triggersome. I would run into people because a lot of us had similar classes. And I couldn't really go anywhere else because I already kind of described I was just like a mediocre student. I was just like, So I felt stuck. And, as soon as we get like released from the program, the gentleman who accused me of sexual assault, which was not true, came forward and ended up sending me an email that pretty much was like, oh, here's the whole letter that this guy of one of the 5 put together to make sure we were all on the same page. And it even mentions in the email, his parents who are cops made sure it was all lock and key. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So here I am with like a straight face, like, oh, nobody wants to believe me. And now I have evidence. So I go back and I show them the evidence and they told me to pound sand. They were like, sorry, there's nothing we can do now. And I was like, you're not, they're like, in a nice way, they're like, you're not our problem anywhere. Get the hell out of my office. So I was like, all these men lied. And you're telling me like they get away with lying and like, ruining my self-esteem at the time and character, like it just dragged me through the mud.
Right.
And the guard's not that big, especially like when you're in just a singular state in a job where if those are the only 3 options and there's 5 of you, there's bound to be some overlap. So as you can imagine, I got through my semester. I left for basic training. I remember celebrating my 19th birthday in training. I remember getting my M4. I didn't remember killing it. Like I did so well in basic training, and it really built me back up confidence wise, like who I was. And it really reaffirmed that I could do anything that I freaking want to, and nobody's going to put any more limitations on me or back me into a corner ever again like that. So, a lot of shells were formed. I like to refer to myself as an onion, many layers, beautiful. I'll make you cry, but I taste really, really good garnished. So it's a lame analogy, but it works.
That's good.
So, fast forward, I end up showing up to my unit, and fun fact, the guy who wrote the letter, when I finally got a hold of it, I was shocked. He had included screenshots of chats that he had with me.
No.
Yes. About the date that he took me on and left me in a parking lot without any like transportation or anything. He was just like, oh, you don't want to play my game? Then fine. And he made me, I was like, I'm going to get out of the car now because you're freaking weird.
Yeah.
And, so he just screenshotted texts that were not even in remote context to what was even going on in the original situation. And of course, like I'm 18, 19 years old and my vocabulary was like, F you, you're an effing idiot. Why the F would you do that? Whatever. So they were all thrown in there and it was like, this isn't even like remotely related to what's happening.
Yeah.
But this individual felt so wounded in his pride that in the 7-page letter that he wrote, there was a whole section about not, and I quote, not fully understanding the role of women and why they want to be officers anyway. And
what?
Yeah, it's crazy. I have a copy of it. I have it saved. It was so when I submitted my VA disability, I was like, yeah, This guy told me I was suicidal. He put hysteria, like 20th century hysteria, like they used to lock women up for their periods and being
Yeah.
emotional, like hysteria. I was like, whoa. So I read this and I was floored. I didn't know
Jeez.
how the hell I was like, I got what? Like, and this a bunch of dudes were just like, yeah, that sounds right.
I'm in shock.
So I was just like, this is insane. Like, y'all are nuts.
Uh-huh.
So, oh, you're gonna shit when I tell you, because it just gets worse. It never gets better. It just gets a little worse, you know.
Yeah.
So I have this letter. I mulled through it. I think I read through it twice my entire life. The first time I read it was when I was trying to like get back into the program and reestablish my rapport. And then the second time was in 2019 when I filed for my MST claim with the VA. It was just that triggersome and heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It was devastating. Like I had a whole written counsel up and said it was like dismissed due to lack of character and whatever. It was like a slap in the face. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna keep this shit because I know one
Yeah.
day, like somebody's gonna believe me.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hope to fuck somebody believes me, right?
Oh, right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
yeah. So I I get back from basic training. I get back from AIT. I show up in my first unit, and lo and behold, the guy who wrote the statement is there. The guy, one of the two who raped me is there, and the other guy who accused me of sexual assault are all in my unit.
No. Oh my
Yes.
God. What are the odds?
It's a very small. Well, that's the thing when you have 3 jobs to pick from, and the only
Right.
one that's appealing are engineer and MP. No
Uh-huh.
no discredit to asphalt layers, but like MP kind of stands out and is closer to infantry. So
Right.
I of course wanted a job where I could be a badass, and I am a
Sure.
badass.
Yes, you are.
So we all kind of just wound up. So the other guy I think went like engineer. I think the other two like went engineer. Yeah, the other two went
Mhm.
engineer. So I mean, there really wasn't like the odds were against me here. So I show up and I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. So I go to report. What happened to me because they already had started the whisper mill, and I
Yeah.
was like, no, I am a powerful goddess and I am going to crush this. I'm going to do
Yes.
amazing. I'm not going to allow any of these haters
Mhm.
to dictate my future. Like, just like the
That's
Taylor
right.
Swift quote, like, I will build a castle with all of the bricks you've thrown at me. And I know that's probably not the correct turn of phrase, but it's still valid here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I go and try to report, and I'm like, hey, like, I'm incredibly uncomfortable. And I try to do it in the most like easy way possible.
Mhm.
And years later, I would come to find out that my first sergeant was basically back briefed about what had happened to all of us and that it was taken care of. It was no big deal and to look over it. And later on, I mean, we're talking like almost a decade later, he would end up writing a letter saying how grossly incorrect and how like dishonest both the recruiter and a few other people were in telling this story.
Oh my
And that he wishes he would have listened to me. And I had a
God.
very close relationship with him because he got me an opportunity to start a military program in a correctional facility for women. I did it for like 4 years. Like we had a really good relationship. So like he never knew because somebody else was just like closed shut. Don't fucking listen to anything that's being said. It's over and done with. They need to get over it. Like that was what
Mm.
was told to them coming in. So they didn't have all the context, like
Right.
they're a company that's being stood up from a support element to a full rock and roll, ready to go
Mhm.
company. They had other stuff going on. Hindsight, you look back and you're like, yeah, I could see why that wouldn't be the biggest deal because they didn't have all the context, they didn't have all the clues, and I wasn't about to like reopen old wounds, even though it had not even been a year later. So I'm serving with, my rapist, which I would go on to serve with for 5 years, the same unit. So I walked on a lot of eggshells, but I definitely made sure that there was never a reason for anyone to doubt my abilities, my
Mhm.
competence, or my confidence. And within 3.5 of those 5 years, I became a non-commissioned officer. I had been to best warrior competitions.
Mhm.
I, was leading from the front. I'd been given opportunities both in my community, and I took it upon myself to always seek the details, or just broaden my base from a learning perspective. So I served with him for 5 years. The guy who wrote the letter popped smoke in about 3 months. Guess where he went?
Oh. Mm.
West Point.
No.
West Point. He's an officer somewhere in the world right now who said and disparaged women's character and their competence. Like, I always thought he would be like old pirates, how they used to like mutiny the captain.
Yeah.
I always thought that was going to happen to him. Wherever you are, man, I hope you're doing well. I forgive you for being an idiot. And I hope your soldiers don't kill you by accident one day.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. Because not great. Not a great person. Got a lot of work to
No.
do, bud. I hope you've improved, whoever you are, wherever you are. Right.
Oh.
Um, so then finally the guy who was like, oh, I accuse you of X, Y, and Z, he was with the unit for a few years as well. So those, like, my rapist and him were like thick as thieves. So
Mhm.
anybody was in their friend circle was like an untouchable. Like, I had to walk around that circle very lightly,
Mhm.
tread lightly, couldn't like go and hang out, really develop a lot of close relationships with people because, we're young and a lot of us don't know how to manage that in general.
Right.
So, loose lips sink ships, right? So
Mhm.
in this case, I really couldn't chance any of it. So a lot of my relationships, were scarce and few, and it was strictly professional. And I would just take care of my soldiers, and I did. That's exactly what I did. I took care of my soldiers, and I made sure that the rapport was professional and that I could be an advocate on their behalf, in addition to the women that I served with who may find themselves, unfortunately, in a situation like this. And God willing, like, I would do anything in my power to make sure that they'd never be in a position like I was. And I think that was something a lot of folks didn't realize during my time in service, was like, I did a lot of the stuff that I did, both from a very like detail oriented and by the book way,
Mhm.
because I knew what it was like to get fucked by the book.
Yeah.
And because of my sex, because of my gender, because of the stigma around, PTSD, PTS, military sexual trauma, depression, anxiety. A lot of people don't disclose some of that stuff during service because they don't want to be viewed as weak or miss out on opportunities. And I was definitely that person. And I compartmentalized for years.
What gave you the strength to come forward and to be open about it, your story?
It took a really long time, and I had went through bouts of anxiety and depression. I was throwing myself into my work at the university, at the college, my own education, double majoring, my work with the American Legion, Student Veterans of America, the community. I kept myself very proactive and busy to really distract myself from ever truly coping with how I was feeling,
Mhm.
and really trying to dismantle the distrust and the moral injury that led me to have such superficial and transactional relationships for the remainder of my career, because I did not trust people. Like, I had, all the, classic symptoms of general anxiety, all the classic symptoms of PTS. There were certain things, like I would go to drill and I would just get so anxious because I have to be on all the time. Like, Ashley has to be here working hard 24/7 because I cannot show anybody that I am weak or that I can be ever taken advantage of like I was before. And I worked very diligently for years to try and commission. And unfortunately, when you're, blacklisted and you're by the book and you call out some different indiscrepancies from each unit, specifically my last unit that I was in, who I ended up having a friend of my rapist in my team. And he tried to blackmail me, Like, this is almost 8 years later, towards the end of my like 7.5, like 7 year mark. I'm like, really? Like,
Yeah.
at that point, I was just like, man, like, you are mediocre, you are small, and you don't have a lot going on in your life outside of this. So I'm going to forgive you for just being a dumbass,
Yeah.
being rude and mean and like vindictive. And I requested him to be transferred out of my squad. They would not do it. You know, it was very difficult. So I just had always felt like I hit these obstacles where I had failures in leadership, and I didn't want to ever be that person. So in my own personal creed was like, how can I develop soldiers? How can I train them? How can I make them the best versions of themselves, both, you know, personally and professionally, because I only had limited time with them while I was in the guard. So, you know, the story's rough because over the years, I just refused to believe that there was anything wrong with my behavior.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of folks out there who are listening who have had anxiety and depression, like crippling anxiety and depression, but still somehow manage to put a smile on your face and be a high functioning performer and overachiever, ultra independence is a trauma response. Let me say that again. Ultra independence is a trauma response.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That is what I endured for the majority of my career. And it wasn't until I was getting out of the service, and I, of course, you know, I knew everything what I needed to for benefits. I wanted to make sure that my claim was started while I was still in. So I started at the 6-month window, and that was in May 1st of 2019. And that was the first time that I decided that I think it's time that I relinquish the power of this story by sharing it. And if anything, give other people some context as to why I'm the way I am, but also that you can come out on the other side and use these opportunities to have post-traumatic growth and challenge yourself and make sure that you are able to tackle and be present and be able to tackle what you set your mind and your heart to. So yeah, I remember I shared it publicly just on my Facebook page, I remember, and that's what I sent you, Lindsay, is that's the first time that I had told anyone outwardly what had happened.
Yeah.
And there were so many people, like the flood of love that came in.
Wow. Wow.
You know, because people had known me at this point my entire career. I had no idea that I walked on eggshells, that I was anxious or depressed, or that I was doing all the things I was doing because I never wanted to be backed into a corner again and not have an opportunity taken away from me because of someone else's behavior. And I really got into Stoicism and, you know, understanding that like I can only control what I can control, and that's how I react. And we can give people a lot of power and energy if we choose to, but knowing oneself and how to forgive, but not necessarily forget, is really important. And I think it's a part of the healing process, and people will go through it at different times, but a lot of it's bringing it up front and being real and truthful with yourself about how you feel. You know, I was thrown all these opportunities to move out to Washington, D.C. I was running for Miss Veteran America. I was doing all of this stuff, like all the things like nobody would expect, that I was like moderately to severely depressed, burnt out, trying to just keep up and do everything in my power to appear normal. And I don't know if there's any Addams Family fans out there, but Morticia Addams used to say what's normal for a spider is chaos for a fly. And I felt like I was always in a fly, like in a web, or another analogy, if you will, is like a bird in a cage. I really felt like I was seen, but never really truly heard, that like my independence, my freedom, my choices were taken away from me. And that I had to always be in a presenting format, right? So my insides were just kind of melting and crumbling and falling apart. But when I finally told people outwardly what happened, I remember that first sergeant that had no idea called me. He was like, we were friends. He didn't know. Like, at what point do you, like, people feel like sometimes that information is just burdensome?
Yeah.
Right. I think it's important to share, but I think once you've dealt with it and held it for so long, you don't want to be anybody else's problem. You don't want anyone to worry about you excessively. And those are tough spaces to be in. It's like a rock and a hard place. But
Mhm.
like I said, there was a lot of love that poured out, and a lot of people that kind of finally were like, wow, that's why Sergeant G is the way Sergeant G is. And that's why we love her. And we have like a new profound, appreciation for both my advocacy, both in the women veteran space and doing all the things I was doing, because people didn't understand why I was doing it.
Yeah.
And now they had the why. They
And
had the why.
how's your healing journey been since this incident?
So I have been in individual therapy for almost 2.5 years now. I did bouts of therapy back in 2014 through 2016. It's been tough. It's impacted my relationships. It's impacted my, how do I want to phrase this? Like, it impacted, like, I didn't keep a lot of people close to me.
Mhm.
You were like a work friend, or it was transactional, right? Like, oh, you work here, I work here, or, oh, it's in it for me, or like, you know what I mean? Like, it was just like, I just was really straightforward and upfront with people for a long time, that I just kept really superficial relationships. And
Right.
that's really empty. That's a really empty feeling. So I can say that in the past, couple years now, I've just been hitting individual therapy really hard, focusing on rediscovering myself, establishing very healthy boundaries
Mhm.
for work-life balance. But I'm to the point where I don't really refer to it as a balance, because that would mean that like they're opposing forces,
Yeah.
because I really love what I do.
Mhm.
And my passion, purpose has all come together in full circle for me. So it wasn't about balance necessarily in those two things. It was about me accepting who I was as a person,
Yeah.
who I am. But it's been a really interesting journey, because I put aside a lot of opportunities to really discover who I am. And now at 28 years old, I, I've recently come out as a bisexual woman.
Mm.
I have, really looked really hard at my, work relationships. I've
Yeah.
been trying to develop more meaningful, in-depth, quality friendships, doing the adventures and the things that I want to do, and understand that, like, work is work and it will always be there. But I need to like take care of myself has been the main
Mm.
priority. So self-care has been huge. I would say, I mean, between taking myself to the massage parlor, or getting a
Mhm.
facial, to my nails done, um, to just having, a glass of wine and a bubble bath, to going out and having fun with friends and
Yeah.
decompressing, and, riding my bike, exercising. I will say that, during my stint in service, I got injured in 2017, and I unfortunately, in the whole grand scheme of things, was told I was faking my injury because I was a chick. I didn't know how that was possible. But, I've had military injury in my knee,
Mhm.
and, that would cause me to gain weight. So I've lost 25 pounds this past year, which is really great.
Awesome.
Just kind of getting back to my new normal,
Yeah.
and encouraging people to take the time to invest in themselves and tell my story, because I'm still fighting with the VA, even though I work for the VA. Like, it's this, conundrum that is the labyrinth of VA disability. But I
Right.
do encourage everyone to put in that claim,
Mhm.
to make your voices heard.
Yeah.
Because if we continue on a path where we allow silence,
Mhm.
to permeate, then we're not going to make substantial change in this space. And within the past, I would say few years, folks are finally waking up to the real errors in both policy and how we review sexual assault, sexual trauma, like cases, right?
That's right.
To harassment. Like, we're making progress. Is it quick enough? It's never always quick enough. It's bureaucratic. It's an institution. What are you going to do?
Sure.
But you just have to keep the pressure on. And I just would want everyone to know that take care of yourself, find that confidant, seek individual therapy, seek resources at the VA. There's plenty out there. Don't feel like you have to live with that moral injury and that trauma all by yourself, because everyone has a different story. Everyone copes a little bit differently. But it's nice to know that somebody's there.
That's right. And what final message or takeaway would you want somebody to have of your scar?
Some scars are invisible.
Mhm.
Some scars are invisible and you'll never see them unless someone shows them to you. And that requires trust and having an open mind and just accepting and loving that person. So my message is to be kind to one another because we never know what other people are going through,
Yeah.
and to listen twice as much as you speak to someone who is going through a hard time. Sometimes what I have found, and I use this in my own marriage, right? Um, would you like me to give you feedback? Or would you like to give me a solution? And I
That's
swear to
powerful.
God, that has negated so many issues. I'm either like I'm your cheerleader or I'm like your like Einstein. Like I'm solving the problem, or I'm like, yeah, that was totally not cool. I agree with you. Forget that person, right?
Right.
So like that would be the little nugget of advice outside of course, filing for your MST VA disability claim. You know, the VA has resources out there. There are MST coordinators. You can find that on like, you know, the va.gov website. You can check all of that out. You know, there are resources out there. I promise you that. And don't ever feel like you're alone, because you're not. No matter how sad or desperate you feel, like there's always going to be somebody. And that if you're ever feeling suicidal, please reach out to a friend. And if you have that friend, be that battle buddy, check on them. You know, who cares if you're not inconveniencing them, just check
Yeah.
on them because you love them.
Mhm.
And you know, always know, you know, we do have the, you know, the veteran suicide hotline, and those are all opportunities to have your voice heard. And there are support groups out there, and there are retreats. There are all kinds of things that both men and women who have been you know, unfortunate, you know, victims of military sexual trauma can, you know, utilize
Mhm.
in their rediscovery of themselves and who they are outside of and now after the trauma.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your vulnerability, your courage, your honesty about your scar. I know this is a huge topic that is on the forefront of our leaders, our congressional staff members. I mean, you name it, every organization, it feels like, that helps veterans. This is a big thing that people are starting to take notice of. And
Right.
it is so important that stories are heard and
Mm-hmm.
and valued and validated. And what you have done is absolutely incredible. And it just gives me chills hearing your story. And to know that I have somebody in my life who is so impactful and making changes where these need to be made.
I
So I
appreciate
wanted
that.
to, yeah, I am so grateful for that. And I know that somebody listening is going to be able to take your story and do something for themselves or for somebody else. So can you tell us a little bit about where people can connect with you or some of the projects that you're working on?
Sure. So I'm on all social media for the exception of TikTok and Twitter. I keep the double T's out of it. Just because shit gets real quick on those platforms. I'm not ready to dance, and I'm not ready to verbally judo people every day
Right.
with a character limit. So not my things. But I am very gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? I do a lot on LinkedIn. I love the professional platform. So you can find me on LinkedIn. It's just literally my full name. I promise you, there's only one of me. Like, I'm serious. Like when I say that, people are like, oh. No, I'm like there are only 5 people with the name Garbolja, and
Yeah.
there is nobody other than me with a Russian, Ukraine, hyphenated Puerto Rican, Colombian last name. I promise you that. You should see my name tape. Like it was ridiculous. They used to joke around and put the extra name tape under my armpit. So like
Oh my gosh.
I would salute like Doofy, and I'd be like, reporting for duty. And like I'd have both of my name tapes. It's great. My soldiers love me. I was hilarious.
Yeah.
But comedy is one of those other things too. Like I don't take myself too seriously anymore. So sorry, comedy people. Other
Good for the
note,
soul.
comedy. Find something that makes you laugh and
Yeah,
enjoy it.
for sure.
But anyway, so I'm on LinkedIn. I am on Facebook. I have a public figure page there. I am also on Instagram, same capacity.
Mhm.
So I'm, my platforms are all about motivating and kind of just showing just a little bit of my journey. So that's where you can find me. Obviously, I was a business owner too. Like if you go to guideoneducation.com, you can check out my website. I promise I'm going to have a new website soon. Very excited.
Yeah.
With all my services and all the things that I do in that capacity. If you are a podcast listeners, as well, and if you're listening to this, I would assume maybe check out Tango Alpha Lima podcast. That's the American Legion's podcast. It's a good time. We do a lot of great interviews. More recently, I just got a chance to interview the VA secretary, which is crazy because he's actually like my big boss. So people were like, "Oh, that's cool," and I'm like, "Yeah, it is pretty cool."
Yeah, it is neat. That is so
Hoping to
neat.
do lunch with him soon, so it'll be nice.
That's fantastic. Well, thank
Little
you,
things.
Ashley. Yeah, that is so amazing. And I will be sure to include some of the links to how people can connect with you. So it's very simple and easy to do. I know Ashley would be more than happy to support you in your journey, whatever that may be. So we will sign off here. Thank you, Ashley, for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.